Recently, Chingy posted a picture of himself with a new look, clean shaven, and the comments initially were complimentary, but then they started to reflect something he's been trying to escape for many years. Chingy's initial impact on the music industry is actually much greater than people think, as well as the money he lost. In order to understand, we need to take a look back to 2003, where it all started, and how the music industry worked back then. I'm Kevin Ross. This is 30 plus years in industry coverage from industry people. In the music industry, a lie doesn't just hurt your feelings. It hits your publishing, kills your touring income, your brand deals can dry up, and labels move their money somewhere else without a single person ever having to tell you why. That is what happened to Chingy. A false story attached itself to his name in the middle of a run that was generating real money. And by the time the truth came out, the business had already dried up. Before we get into this story, I want you to understand the world Chingy walked into. Because if you don't understand the world, you won't understand what was taken from him. And if you are new here, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. This is industry coverage from industry people, and you don't want to miss stories like this one. The music industry in 2003 was already bleeding. Think about what had just happened the 2 years before Chingy even walked in the door. The country was still shaken from 9/11. The economy had taken a serious hit. Consumer spending was down. And on top of all of that, Napster had ripped a hole through the record business that the labels were still trying to patch. Global music revenue had already started falling from its 1990 peak of over $23 billion, and nobody knew how bad it was going to get. What we know now is that it took the industry 24 years to get back to where it was in 1999. And that recovery only happened because of streaming. In 2003, none of that was visible yet. All the labels knew was that the money was going in the wrong direction and they needed artists who could sell. The entire pipeline that labels had locked down for decades, manufacturing, distribution, radio, retail, and promotion, all of it was getting disrupted by a kid with a computer and a DSL connection. Labels like Capitol, Def Jam, and Interscope were cutting rosters, pulling back budgets, and doing what corporations do when they get scared. They stopped taking chances. That was the world Howard Bailey Jr., also known as Chingy, walked into. He was born March 9, 1980 in Walnut Park, on the north side of St. Louis, a neighborhood he called the Bad Blocks. A kid who grew up in a two-bedroom house with nearly a dozen relatives started writing lyrics at 9 years of age, and he went by H. Thugsy initially before he changed his name to Chingy. Chingy got connected to two producers named Alonzo Zoe Lee Jr. and Shamar Sham Daughtery. The team called themselves the Track Stars. They were not bedroom producers. By the time they linked with Chingy, they already had production credits on Bone Thugs and Harmony Records and were being managed by Shaka Zulu. And if you know anything about Atlanta hip-hop in that era, you know who Shaka Zulu is. He co-founded Disturbing the Peace with Ludacris and his brother Jeff Dixon. And DTP was operating as a joint venture with Capitol Records. This was not a small operation. When Zoe and Sham brought Chingy into the fold, they opened a serious door for him. The first song they made together was Right Thurr, built in Zoe's apartment. Chingy heard the beat and said he had something for it. That was the record that changed everything. Released April 14, 2003, it stayed at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 5 non-consecutive weeks, and it hit number 1 on the Hot Rap Songs chart for 4 straight weeks. The only record keeping it from the top spot on the Hot 100 was Beyoncé's Crazy in Love. Let that sink in for a second. Your debut single is being blocked by one of the biggest records of the entire decade, and you are still number 2 for 5 weeks. That is not luck. That is a legitimate hit record. Jackpot dropped July 15, 2003, and peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The Track Stars produced nearly every track, and Chingy was not just the artist. He was a writer. Holidae In, featuring Snoop Dogg and Ludacris, was co-written by Chingy. Ludacris, Zoe, and Sham. It peaked at number 3 on the Hot 100. Then One Call Away, featuring Jay Weave, peaked at number 2. 3 singles off a debut album, all 3 in the top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Holidae In earned a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Collaboration in 2004. The album was certified double platinum, and then Chingy did it again with Powerballin' in 2004. It peaked at number 10 on the Billboard 200. Hood Star in 2006 peaked at number 9 and gave him another top 10 Hot 100 single with Pulling Me Back, featuring Tyrese. By the time it was over, Chingy had charted 8 times on the Billboard Hot 100. He collaborated with Snoop Dogg, Ludacris, Janet Jackson, Jermaine Dupri, Tyrese, Trina, Murphy Lee, and Nate Dogg. Grammy nominated on the Need for Speed Underground 2 soundtrack. 8 times on the Billboard Hot 100 for a new artist is basically unheard of. In about 70 years of that chart, only about 8,000 artists have charted even once. This man had a life built around real success. And during his peak, he was not sitting in St. Louis watching it happen from the sidelines. He had moved to Atlanta, which was a hotbed for the music industry at that time, and it was where the business was. Why are we here? Why is this not just a story about a successful career? Because around 2010, a photo circulated online. A trans woman named Sidney Starr took a picture with Chingy and implied that they had been in a relationship. That was it. And it was more than enough. A photo and a claim, and it spread very fast. Blogs ran it, radio personalities put it on the air, promoters heard it, label people heard it, fans heard it. And even though Sidney Starr eventually came out publicly and said the story was false and apologized, that still wasn't enough for some people. The accusation gets all the attention, and the correction got a paragraph. The rumor got repeated for years. The apology was completely forgotten in a week. The lie became the story, and the truth became the cleanup. And when that happens to black male artists in hip-hop, especially at that time, the damage is not just personal. It hits the money directly. The cultural side of this needs to be said too. The black community is not a monolith, never has been. There are black people who are LGBT, there are black people who are strongly against it, and there is a large middle group of people who really don't care. They're too busy raising their kids and paying their bills. But even in that middle section, those are also the ones that read the headlines. They want to talk about it, and their curiosity is always attached with judgment. And when the subject is a black male artist in hip-hop, the judgment, especially in those days, could end a career. The LGBT community did not damage Chingy's career, the lie did. But the culture's willingness to treat that association as something shameful is what gave the lie its power. And it cost that man millions. And here is exactly how. If you are finding this story useful, go ahead and hit subscribe. This is industry coverage from industry people, and there are a lot more where this came from. An artist at Chingy's level in the mid-2000s, multiple Hot 100 hits, double platinum debut, Grammy nominated, international name recognition, and the fact that he came into the industry when the industry desperately needed rejuvenation. He was positioned to earn from several directions at the same time. Touring alone could have been enormous. Clubs, theaters, festivals, package tours, overseas dates, corporate shows. And then there's publishing. Chingy wrote on his records, and those credits on Right Thurr, Holidae In, One Call Away, and Pulling Me Back, those songs earn every time they're played on the radio, licensed for TV or film, used in a commercial or streamed. Right Thurr became part of that sound of an entire era. And records like that pay writers for decades when the career stays healthy enough to keep the songs in rotation. Then there are the brand deals. And here is where I want to give you a specific example that is not theoretical. Chingy had a deal in progress with Interscope Records when the Sidney Starr rumor hit. Interscope allegedly pulled out completely. They didn't want any part of it. He said it himself. That one deal disappearing hurt him badly. That was not a projection. That could have been a massive specific check that never got written because a lie was more entertaining than the truth. Now multiply that by every promoter who got cautious, every brand that quietly passed, every label conversation that went cold, every radio programmer who stopped returning calls. None of them ever had to say why. Nobody had to put anything in writing. The business just moved differently. quietly, and the artist is left trying to figure out what changed, while everybody acts like nothing happened. For an artist with Chingy's verifiable track record, losing somewhere between $8 and $12 million in potential earnings over that stretch is not a wild number. That is what the math looks like. There's even more to the story that is rarely told. After the commercial slide and the rumors, Chingy went back home to St. Louis. He was not exiled there. He chose to go back and regroup. Working with his cousin Young Spiffy on his own label, Slot-A-Lot. But underneath all of that, things got genuinely dark. He lost family members, he lost friends, and he sank into a depression for a period of time. His career dropped to the very bottom of his priority list because some things are bigger than the music business, and grief is one of them. In 2013, he announced he had become a practicing Black Hebrew Israelite and walked away from mainstream rap entirely. People laughed at that too, and they should not have. This is a man who had been chewed up by the industry, hit with a lie that cost him millions, lost people close to him, and was trying to find something solid to stand on. He eventually moved away from that path as well. But the searching itself makes sense when you know the full story. And then things picked up a bit. In September 2024, Chingy performed at the Music at the Intersection Festival in St. Louis, and former Mayor Tashara Jones gave him a mayoral proclamation officially declaring September 14th Chingy Day in the city.
So we just want to thank you and give you your flowers for being such a part of the fabric that is so St. Louis. When you think of the music scene in St. Louis, you think of artists like obviously Nelly, Tina Turner, Chuck Berry, but we think of Chingy. And Music at the Intersection thinks of Chingy. And so I really enjoyed your set tonight, brother. I was dancing to every tune. But it is just such an honor to honor you tonight. Thank you for this. But I have something for you. We are declaring today Chingy Day in the city of St. Louis.
The kid who grew up in Walnut Park in a 2-bedroom house with a dozen relatives, his city gave him his flowers. He has been working on a book called Conscious Creation Manifestation, launched a fragrance line for men and women, and runs a social media series called Wisdom Wednesdays. Chingy is the father of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. One of his sons, Isaiah Russell Bailey, grew up to become an actor and starred in the Netflix show Family Reunion and the Disney film Crater. And if you've been watching this story unfold and you're not subscribed yet, now is a good time to do that. Industry coverage from industry people. Hit the button at the bottom and stay with us. So the full arc is this. St. Louis kid who moved to Atlanta when the money was real, went back home when the business turned its back, fought through depression, loss, and a spiritual detour, and came out on the other side with his city literally naming a day after him. That is a richer story than most people know, and it is one that deserves to be told. In today's industry, does Chingy have a second chance? Absolutely. And he is actually more prepared now than he ever was. He appears to educate himself on how the industry works on the back end, and he's constantly doing videos talking about things like publishing. The industry does not have the same gates it once did. It is not radio-based, it's not label-based, it's not even permission-based, but it's creative-based. There'd have to be some reinvention, of course, some repositioning, but it could happen. The machine that quietly walked away from him does not run the game anymore. The real question is whether telling the truth will ever carry the same energy people put into spreading the lie. It should, but it hasn't yet. This is 30 plus years in industry coverage from industry people. I'm Kevin Ross. Please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.